Welcome back, friends, to our penultimate podcast, next to the last one for this calendar year. We will be discussing the book of Revelation in 2026, although you should finish before then. Today we finish with the epistles of 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Jude, or as it is in this translation, Judah, and looking at this part of our scriptures. The first two letters, the letters from Peter, may be from the hand of the disciple Peter, the apostle Peter. Certainly, traditionally, we have connected them with that disciple and his witness to us. First Peter emphasizes the place of trial and suffering, calls us to lean into the challenges of life, and to see that as the means of our redemption, if you will. N.T. Wright, in his introduction, I was struck, he said that for First Peter, the victory won through Jesus's suffering will be implemented through the suffering of Jesus's people. And that sense that this suffering that we go through is the way that we make the kingdom present.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was the same for me. The sticking out was the focus that he did, is how he encouraged people to continue living in the way of Christ despite the suffering that they would experience in a sense, and in the focus too on holy living and having that good conduct, that when things happen, that we continue to live the way Christ had encouraged us to live. And I think it's just even a thing to think about today, with things going on even in our world today. And it's so easy to, you can disagree with someone, but we shouldn't get to a point where we're doing something that would not be like Christ-like in a sense of those things.
You can disagree, but don't be disagreeable.
There you go.
The saying goes.
There you go. Yeah, and that was 6 things on my mind, because so much going on in our world today, and so much we might not disagree with. It's so easy for people to just want to do something that would not be Christ-like, but at the same time, being strong and defending your faith is what we are called to do. Despite the suffering or persecution or whatever we may be feeling, the response is still to be in that sense of the Christ-like way, not technically get revenge or get but just be remindful of who we are in this sense.
There are two things that come to mind in that. First, I was very struck as we came to these particular epistles at the disagreement in the early church. We want to believe that the early church was everything was wonderful, and that folks got along, and everybody was living good and pure lives. And you hear in particularly more so, I think, in the epistles of John, he calls out individuals by name and calls them essentially antichrists. And that that kind of strikes. The second thing that comes to mind for me is, in those disagreements, how do I know I'm on the right side? How do we know?
Yeah, it's a good thing. And, they dealt with a lot of this stuff with having teachers coming in that were false teachers, that were leading people astray. And it was almost like he's saying, just remember what we taught you. It was, I know it's harder to say than do. I think when you're thinking of this, because people can tell you things that sound good, and can can pull you away, and but yet the title of my second chapter in First Peter says your identity as a believer. Well, who is your identity? What is your identity made through? And to remember who you are in your identity, uh, can help you to make sure that you're staying on the right side, I guess, in some sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, I don't have any grand answers
Right,
for it.
exactly.
I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it's difficult. I mean,
Oh,
we
you're right.
look at,
Yep.
there are plenty of preachers in this world with whom I just fundamentally disagree.
Sure.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we've talked a little bit over this year about the influence of Christian nationalism in the church,
Yep.
and I believe that that's just wrong and problematic.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I just don't know that I can call it false teaching, just because I'm afraid that that's too strong.
Yeah.
Speaking of the
Yeah.
identity of Christ, in chapter 2 of First Peter, Peter starts talking about this idea of longing for spiritual milk, the real stuff,
Yeah.
that we can grow up into our salvation, that we will become a building, as he describes it, living stones being built into a temple.
Yeah.
For the Spirit of God to dwell.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, with this. It's just, I love part of one of my verses that, when I'm reading through this, that always sticks out is chapter or verse 9, when he speaks about the chosen race, that you're that chosen race, that royal priesthood, that holy nation, a people who are God's own possession. And and then he says, you have become this people so that you may speak of the wonderful acts of the one who called you out of darkness from his amazing light. And it just sticks to me. And maybe because it's this time of year when we're really talking about the darkness and the light and everything going on, but that one just really is to me, that was the reminder, is like, God has chosen you. God has chosen us to be his people and to help lead others into the right path, so to speak, or the right way of living, and to teach them the holy ways of living as he wants us to stay focused on. But to see that piece where he said he's pulled us out of that, and now it's up to us to help pull others out of that. And it just really sticks with me for this time of year, when you see sometimes there are people, when we want to be joyful and exciting for this time of year, but there are people who may not feel that happiness or joyfulness all the time, but to help them realize that they're not alone and that the light of Jesus Christ is with them.
Right. And I think that, we move so quickly, Peter moves so quickly, I guess I should say, from that notion of being holy and chosen and special, to remind us that doesn't mean that everything's going to be wonderful.
Sure.
In verse 19, is it to your credit? You see, if because of a godly conscience you put up with unjust, painful suffering. Yep. After all, what credit is it if you do something wrong and are beaten for it and take it patiently? But if you do what is right and suffer for it and bear it patiently, that is to your credit.
Yeah. And who wants to get
I mean, that's not. It's a tough sell, but it is what our book says, that we are not guaranteed happiness 100% of the time.
Amen to that. Right. And I think that was the message even Jesus told his whole disciples to do, even when he was here. It was not something that it wasn't always going to be peaches and cream, as we like to say, but there was going to be some difficult times, even in life of ministry, even in them, and to see that is, he talks about this the same thing of in chapter 4, how he even says, therefore, since Christ suffered as a human, you should also arm yourselves with his way of thinking. But this is because whoever suffers is finished with sin. But, it goes on, but he says, you've wasted enough time doing what unbelievers desire, living in their unrestrained immorality and lust, their drunkenness and excessive feasting and wild parties, and their forbidden worship of idols. He goes on and on and on. It's like, you've wasted enough time doing this stuff. Just, it seems pretty self-explanatory, but yet harder to take in, to apply than reading.
It's easy to understand, hard
yes,
to do.
Yes, good words.
Yeah, it is. Again, he talks about holding firm in our love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins.
Yep.
And the need that we have to stand firm in all that we are doing. In 2 Peter, we continue to reflect on this idea of becoming shaped by our faith. In chapter 1, verse 5, he says, you should strain every nerve to supplement your faith with virtue, and your virtue with knowledge, and your knowledge with self-control, and your self-control with patience, and your patience with piety, and your piety with family affection, and your family affection with love. That we just keep adding to our declaration of faith until we become the embodiment of love, that Christian perfection of which Wesley spoke.
Yes, absolutely. And, that was a thing that again, some of the very similar things that I wrote down. And even with this, he gives that reminder again about the Christian life and what it's about. And then as he gets into chapter 2, it's where he's having them be mindful of those teachers that will kind of try to lead them astray, and the false teachings, and to help them. He says they will introduce destructive opinions and deny the master who brought them, bringing quick destruction on themselves. And so he doesn't want them to fall into that same thing, but to be that they're there, that those false prophets are out there, and those false teachers are there, and that they'll try and do things to help, pull strings. And then after that is realizing that there is that God is a judge God. He is a God of judgment. And so being mindful that, and even shows some examples of how, different areas and how people were judged because of different things into the stories. It's constant reminders of that, of, yes, be mindful, these prophets are here, and there's a God who's going to judge at the end. And, just almost like preparing them for the day when Christ comes, what we should do in that time frame, because that's really what he starts talking about as he goes into chapter 3, is that the day of Christ coming in judgment again.
Well, and I think that it's easy for us to push away this idea of judgment. There are some that make the scriptures only be about judgment, though usually it's about judgment for others rather than themselves. And then there are those that make the scriptures appear to have no judgment, and the truth of the matter is that it is there. I think, for me at least, the judgment of God is not, first of all, it's not arbitrary.
Very true.
And second of all, it is done in love. And, I think when I was a kid, the worst thing that could happen to me was when my mother would say, I'm very disappointed in you.
Mm.
That was harder on me than, you know, if either of my parents ever spanked me. I don't really remember it happening, but it may have, but that disappointment. And I think that's, for me, that's what this judgment is. It's not God relishing sending people into
Yeah.
oblivion.
Yeah.
It's simply God saying, you could have been so much more. I remember hearing a preacher's story about somebody after they died being taken to a room filled with all good things, and God saying, these are the blessings that you wouldn't let me give you.
Mm. Mm. Makes, yeah, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
So as we get it into the John chapters, even throughout, the three, I think we see a common theme of love a lot. Beginning in First John, he really talks about God being the light and how we're supposed to live in the light, and but in this sense, how is one of the things that he really mentions in that uh, in verse 5 when he says God is light and there is no darkness at all. Again, it's a common theme that we just saw in Peter, but he says if we claim we have fellowship him and live in darkness, we are lying and do not act truthfully. But if we live in the light in the same way that he is the light, then we have fellowship with each other, in the blood of Jesus, his son cleanses us from every sin. And so, part of that, what I saw and was hearing is just the importance of living in light, but also the importance of fellowshipping with others, and realizing that it's not just about us, but it's about others in this love, and as you talked about this, Wesley's perfection in love was really about loving God and loving others,
Right.
and so and you kind of see that in this message as he calls us to live in the light that he has. It's not just living for our benefit of ourselves, but it's also for the benefit of others. Because he even talks about if you love a brother, and say, but but it says, but the person who hates a brother or sister is in darkness and lives in darkness and doesn't know where to go because the darkness blinds the eyes. And so it's that point of making sure that we're again staying in the right ways and trying to stay.
Yeah, the two words that really to me stand out in all of the Johns, but particularly First John, are fellowship and abiding. And I think that they are much stronger words in the original than we take them to be. Fellowship is more than just hanging out. It's more than just the occasional meal together. Fellowship, as John is using it, is complete partnership. It's truly being a part of one another's lives. And I think abiding is probably the right translation for us, because it speaks of a rock solid kind of existence. He in chapter 2 verse 28 he talks about children abide in him, so that when he is revealed we may have boldness and may not be put to shame before him at his royal appearing. That abiding, again over in chapter 3, he speaks about God's love abiding in them. And it's more than just living. It's a rock solid, steadfast kind of thing. In fact, I went and looked back at the Greek, and there's 40 years ago I learned how to read Greek, and the John stuff is about the only thing I could come close to still being able to read, which says something about all of the John writings. But looked and tried to see whether or not that is that abiding is connected to the Old Testament word of hesed and the steadfast love of God. It's not, but they are cousins, if you will. They're not quite the same, but there is that solidness that I think sometimes is missing when we talk about love and fellowship and the Christian community. There's not always that solid commitment.
That's true.
I think about folks that drift from one congregation to another, and even pastors that move on too quickly. I mean, there are times that moving is right, but I think we should be committed to one another.
Yeah, I agree, and part of that is exactly like you said, even in chapter 4, towards that part of I guess it's the second half of 14, where it talks about God being love, and as you said, whether it's abiding, mine says those who remain, those who abide, same situation. But if you remain in that love, you remain in God, and God remains in you, and that's where I think, as you said, and when you miss that love of one another, that fellowship, that time of there's a lot that you can miss out on, in the sense of, if you don't have the willingness to put the work into those relationships, you can miss out on a lot. And I think that says a lot of having that having the ability to be connected in some type of I think you've mentioned this a lot, how small groups and Wesley believed the same thing. I mean, they had classes and bands in different ways before to keep people accountable. I mean, they actually, people, if you don't know history, but they actually had people confess sins that they've done wrong in their groups together. And I thought, who would do that today? I mean, and today I can't, you just don't see people sitting and saying, oh gosh, I just screwed up. I did this. And we don't do it with each other in a way like they would have done back then. And that is really, that accountability though was what kept you strong. It kept you going, because you had people in that group that you knew cared for you, loved you, would help you through whatever that situation was.
Exactly. And I guess I have to wonder if what that says about our belief in forgiveness. If we can't, if we can't say to one another, I did X, I regret it. Can you forgive me?
Yeah.
Whether it's something I did to you, or directly, or just something that I did, and you're my Christian brother that I'm confessing to.
Yeah. So, and as we finish this and we get into chapter or 2nd John and 3rd John, very short books. Again, 2nd John begins as mine says, to the chosen gentlewoman and her children, which really was another name for a church. And so, I don't know what your translation has, mine has that, but it's basically just another name that he's addressing a church that he had, explaining to him how they love. But again, it was one of the first things he says. It reminds me a lot of Paul's writings, in sometimes when Paul says how he started, or how excited he was to hear of the things they're doing. And he says, I was overjoyed to find that some of your children were actually living in the truth, just as we had commanded by the Father. And that gave him hope to know that living in truth to them was that they were loving each other. They knew the word, they were doing those things, and they were loving, and that was part of the truth that they were sharing. And then, after he shares this part, he goes into again about avoiding the false teachers, which has been a message from Peter, the Peter books, and for this one. And then he kind of gives him a little thing about, well, if he gets a chance, he was going to try to visit them and see the face to face thing.
Kind of think of that great meme of the outline of Paul's letters. I'm sure most of our folks have seen it of, Paul, an apostle, how wonderful Jesus is. Oh, please, for the love of God, quit. Oh, Timothy says hi. And you kind of get that sense of, God is love. You should love one another. Stay away from those miserable sons of guns. Oh, by the way, I'll try and come by and see you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Well, this has been a exciting journey, I think, as we near towards the end. Um, uh, as I said, we will come back and record in the first of the year a little reflection on Revelation. But hope that you have been richly blessed through this time, that you have had a chance to grow and to learn. It's been enjoyable for us as well.
Yes. Take care, and we do hope as the days come and in this next couple of days that you have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we look forward to being with you in January.